Well, hello everyone, and good evening. Welcome to another Colorado Sun political event. We've got some special guests joining us tonight. Before we get to them, I want to thank our Sun members for making this event possible and all our events possible. Becoming a Colorado Sun member is quick and easy, and it really truly does make all of these kind of events, all of our articles, everything you read on the site, the newsletters, the podcast possible. And if you become a premium member, you'll get the unaffiliated, our twice weekly politics and policy newsletter, pulling back the curtain on everything from the state house to Congress to city councils to county commissions around the state. So if you really want to get the whole story, I recommend signing up for the unaffiliated. Now on to tonight's event, and I believe two unaffiliated readers themselves, or at least their offices are. I know that. And I also want to acknowledge and thank my colleague Sandra Fish, who's going to be asking some questions alongside me tonight. Fish is kind of the data guru and geek behind all of the really good campaign finance stuff that we do at the Sun. Just a reminder to everyone that you can submit questions throughout the event to questions@coloradosun.com. Pretty simple email. We won't be able to get to everything, but folks submitted a lot of stuff before the event. We're trying to kind of fold as much of it in as possible. We got an hour here, and so we want to make sure we can kind of cover a lot of topics. So on to our panelists who don't really probably need an introduction. U.S. Rep. Yadira Caraveo, Thornton Democrat, representing Colorado's brand new, highly competitive 8th Congressional District. If you lived in the Denver area and you watched TVs, you probably saw her face throughout the election cycle back in November or in the months leading up to it. She was elected in November and was a state representative before joining Congress, and before entering politics, she worked as a pediatrician. And I know even while at the State House, you were seeing some patients as well. And then also with us is U.S. Rep. Brittany Pettersen, a Lakewood Democrat who represents Colorado's 7th Congressional District, was kind of the West Metro area into some of those central South mountain counties. She succeeds U.S. Rep. Ed Perlmutter, people probably know. And she was also elected in November and served as a state senator before heading to Washington. So we've known each other for a long time at the State House. We've been chasing these two around for quite a while. And they're joining us both from Washington, D.C. Thank you guys so much for being here. We really, really appreciate it. And we're excited to kind of hear about how your first couple months in Congress have been. So I know we said we'd give you just a few minutes to kind of talk about what things have been like. And Representative Pettersen, I hope you can go first. Just talk about how things are going and maybe some observations in a minute or two.
Oh gosh, a minute or two?
We can talk for three max.
Hi, everybody. It's so great to be with you. And thank you, Jesse and Sandra, for hosting this. And I really appreciate the work of the Colorado Sun. And it is surreal to hear you say U.S. Rep. Pettersen and Caraveo. So we did it, Yadira. It's still an incredible, it is definitely surreal every day, but I'm so happy to be with you all. It has been a whirlwind from getting elected to going into freshman orientation, trying to find a place to live, figuring out what committees we're going to be on, going through the speaker vote and the contentious days that we had here, and then going into being on committee. I'm on the Financial Services Committee, and obviously a lot going on in that realm. I'm on the Housing and Insurance Subcommittee as well as the National Security Subcommittee, but it's just such an honor to be here. I love this job. I feel so lucky every day that I get to go and fight for our communities, and I look forward to the discussion and answering questions. Did I go into three?
Yeah, that was a good non-filibuster. So Congresswoman Caraveo, hoping you can kind of talk a little bit about your time in a few minutes.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Jesse and Sandra, and everyone who's joining us tonight for this event. Brittany had it absolutely right when she used the word surreal. It's surreal to be the first congressperson for this new district in Colorado and the first Latina congresswoman in Colorado history. We both had hard-fought campaigns to get here, and I'm grateful for all the grassroots support that I got from Commerce City all the way up to Greeley. But I think we both have been ready to put the campaigns behind us. I certainly have been ready to put that behind me and turn to representing all of my constituents. That really has meant putting aside partisan bickering and really focusing on the work and getting results. I'm really proud to be working on the House Agriculture Committee. Weld County, I think a lot of people have been surprised to learn from me, in the northern part of my district is the largest agriculture producing county east of the Rocky Mountains. And so that really shows you the work that our committee is doing is important to our community. A big part of that work this year is going to be in crafting the Farm Bill, which we pass every 5 years on a bipartisan basis to make sure that we're delivering the resources that our farmers, in addition to the nutrition benefits that like SNAP and WIC that were really important to me as a doctor serving my community. I'm also excited to be on the House Science, Space, and Technology Committee using that science background that I have, because Colorado is leading the way in science and tech innovation. And so it's really going to be important for me to foster and support the growth that's really important for our local economy. So thanks so much for being here all tonight. I'm so excited to be taking questions with my friend, Representative Pettersen. And so with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Fish and Jesse.
Yeah, so Representative Caraveo, you spent 4 years in the State House, and Representative Pettersen, you served 6 in the House and 4 years in the State Senate. Could you talk about how different this is from serving in the state legislature? Representative Caraveo, if you could go first.
I mean, the biggest difference is that it's an order of magnitude bigger, right? Literally, we go from 75,000 constituents to, excuse me, to 750,000. And you go from, being, at least for me, 30 minutes from the Capitol to now having to travel halfway across the country to get to work. And so it's bigger. It's issues that for 4 years I had at the state level said, oh, it would be really great to do that, be able to do that, but that's the federal government and I can't touch that. Suddenly, all of these issues that you read about, that you hear about from your constituents, you can do something about and really craft legislation around. And so it's just the grandeur of the building, of representing so many people and being able to touch subjects that before we were limited at the state level.
Representative Pettersen.
Thank you for the question. I talk about this a lot, but the biggest difference for me is surprisingly, it's a lot more sustainable, even though we're flying back and forth almost every week, because we have a team that's supported. We have staff that have experience and that are paid well to be here, that it can actually do the jobs that you need to actually be in this position and represent people well. I think that at the state level, we really fail in supporting legislators. You have a $15 an hour, I think it was barely raised, job for somebody who's usually coming out of college, oftentimes working. And so they have a ton of potential, but they don't have the skills and experience to support you at the level that you. So I think it really fails our constituents at the state level when we don't have the team behind us to get the work that we need done. It's also done in just 4 months. When I watch what's happening in the legislature with the bills that are coming, I think that everyone can agree that some of these things should have taken more time, but we don't actually in Colorado give the capacity to do that. And I think that I think that that's the biggest difference is I have this incredible team, and not that I haven't worked with amazing people, they're just limited with one individual over 4 months. And so we have an active outreach team, sending text messages, sending letters, visiting, doing teletown halls that we're setting up to actually fund getting the information that we need to address the issues that they're facing every day. That's really inspiring about this position, is that we actually, outside of passing legislation, it's the day-to-day work that we get to, the problems that we get to solve for regular people to make sure that government actually works for them. And I would say that that's the biggest difference. Like I said, it's even more sustainable somehow than just living 20 minutes away from the Capitol because of the support system here. Now, I think another thing is outside of DC, looking in it, I was worried about what it would feel like to be here because of the dysfunction, because of how toxic it is, because of the shenanigans and the lack of focus on the real work that people need to get done. But when you're here, you realize it's actually a really small percentage of people who are more worried about the headlines than actually doing the work. And when you're in Washington, it is so much more hopeful and optimistic than what you would expect. And so I just want to put that out there because being here is much different than what you perceive on the outside.
I think it's interesting that you say that, because I feel like when people talk about the Colorado legislature, or at least the lawmakers are always saying well, we get so much more done than Congress. We pass 500 bills a year, but
Sometimes maybe they shouldn't, though. Just
yeah,
kidding.
now you sound like a Republican. So,
No,
well,
no, I'm very proud of it. It's just huge things, right? That take a lot of time. And, I understand why Colorado is set up to be a citizens legislature. You want people with those lived experiences who are coming down and not living in Denver. But I would say but we need to look at how the process that we're setting up, because you don't have a lot of time to get really big things done.
right. I don't know if you and I have had the conversation about term limits in the state legislature, but there's upsides and downsides to it that are pretty interesting. I'm going to actually skip ahead to a reader question because I think it's kind of relevant here, and I think to both your districts. But one of the readers wanted to know, how do you balance representing parts of your district that are maybe more aligned with your values, more Democratic parts of your district and more red parts of your district. There's rural and urban divides in both of your districts, and really differing views from places like, Thornton to, I don't know, Fort Lupton, from Lakewood to Salida. Like, how do you kind of represent that broad swath of people?
Do you want me to go?
Yeah.
You go, Yadira.
Sure, I can jump in. It comes in the name of the gig, right? It's representative. It's you are elected to represent the entire district. And I think for me, getting into it, I really knew that I was going to be representing a toss-up district from the moment that this was drawn. I knew that all of the skills that I had in balancing what I thought patients needed with what their families needed, with what insurance companies needed, with what the healthcare system could provide, was going to be directly translated to the way that I represented this district. That sometimes you take very disparate points of view, and you have to learn how to balance those when you're taking care of a patient. It's very similar when you're representing a district like this that may not seem to come together initially, but really what I have found is
Are we frozen?
Yep. Nope, I think we're good, Brittany. I can hear you. So it's very similar to balancing it can at times seem like a disparate district that has very different needs. As I've been meeting with mayors and council members and commissioners across the district, they're really all concerned about the same things, right? It's the bottom line. It's how are we taking care of working families like the one that I grew up in, and so it's really the people that connect it. And I think we lost Brittany, sadly. So I will keep going. It's the people that connect it and that bring it together, so that the difference between a Greeley and a Thornton really doesn't seem as apparent.
All right. Well, I don't know if Congresswoman Pettersen's still here. She might have to log back on. I think she had a connection issue. So we'll swing back and ask her that question again. But you kind of touched on this before, Representative Caraveo, but wondering kind of if you can talk a little bit about, I think you mentioned the committees that you're on, but what committee assignments you're on, why you wanted those, or if you didn't, how you ended up on those committees. And I think you introduced your first bill this week, and I'm hoping you can kind of talk a little bit about that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. So I ended up on the Agriculture Committee, which was my top choice. Eventually I would love to work on a committee that has healthcare jurisdiction, which in this case is energy and commerce, but agriculture is integral to Colorado and to the 8th District in particular. And so for my first term here, and hopefully long term, I'm really looking forward to working on the Agriculture Committee. Like I said, Weld County is a huge ag producing county in the United States. Adams County is not far behind in terms of the state of Colorado. And so it was very important to me to advocate for the entire district, right? Just like with the question that you asked. This is how I go about making sure that I'm representing everyone in the district, whether they voted for me or not. And it's really taking seriously the issues that are important in the 8th. I'm also on the Science, Space, and Technology Committee. Actually took over basically the seat that Ed Perlmutter left when he retired, and specifically on the Space Subcommittee. Colorado is a powerhouse in terms of aerospace, the aerospace industry. And so it's really important for me to advocate for us to continue to increase our footprint there.
All right, well, we'll go back real fast to Congresswoman Pettersen. So I don't know if you need me to repeat the question, but kind of this idea of how do you represent rural and urban parts of your district, red and blue? How do you kind of encapsulate all of those really sometimes, I'm sure, completely opposite opposing points of view in Congress.
Yeah, you know, a lot of people associate with different parties because of what their parents believed. But when it comes down to key bread and butter issues, the urgent needs of our country and our state and communities, we actually have so much more in common than we have disagree on. And so what I've really enjoyed is going to visit those bright red counties in Custer County, right where it goes into the sand dunes. For all of you who haven't looked at the map of the 7th District, it's Fremont and Teller, and all of those are very red. And then it goes into more purple areas like Chaffee County and in Lake County, and then back into Park. And so what I've really enjoyed is having the opportunity to meet with those local elected officials. It was actually the issues that we talk about, it's not about partisanship. It's about the struggles that people in their community are facing. And in Custer County, hearing about the seniors that rely on Social Security, making sure that that's solvent and that we're not going to reduce benefits for seniors, things like that, I guess in Washington can sound partisan, but when you meet with people at the local level, it's really about having a representative that is actually listening and trying to fight for them in Washington. And I can tell you that what I've constantly heard is, I can't believe that you care. And I can't believe that you're here and that you're coming back to visit. They're just excited to have representation in somebody who's engaged in their community and is going to fight for them. And I'm determined to show them that government can work. But so many of the issues that people are struggling with in Jefferson County are similar, but felt more acutely in those rural parts of the district. When it comes to housing, they've seen some of their housing, the value of their house increase threefold in just a couple of years in some of these communities. And so while we've felt that in Jefferson County and in Broomfield, these smaller mountain communities have really been pushed to the limit, and people who live there their entire lives are unable to stay there, and they're unable to hire workforce. And so I think that I'm excited to represent everybody. I very much enjoy going out to the district and getting to know their issues better. And we'll be meeting with every elected official in every single community for the next, I think we only have a week left of that before I can say that I've met with every local elected official.
And just quickly, I'll ask the question that I asked Congresswoman Caraveo before we move on. I think you talked about what your committee assignments are already, but I'm wondering, if you can just share how you got on them, what they are, and if you've introduced any legislation yet or working on anything. If you want to make any breaking news announcements here, we totally welcome it. We'd like to.
Well, I'm very excited to be, actually, just to go back on what you just asked about the red parts. We also are opening up an office in Canyon City because that's where the population center is. We have so many veterans there who need services, and they need to have representation in that area. So just wanted to add that as well. In terms of my committee, I am on the Financial Services Committee. I'm on Ed Perlmutter's other committee. So we both got to be on his great assignments, and it is an honor to be on the exclusive committee as one of only 2 freshmen who got that spot. I got on that because of how I advocated to be on it because of housing, because of the crisis that we're facing in Colorado and throughout the 7th District, and especially those rural communities. And it's a huge opportunity for me to make an impact at the national level. Of course, I work on a wide variety of issues around education and healthcare, especially public health and the opioid epidemic. But I have a great opportunity there with housing. I also am on the National Security Subcommittee, and I chose that as an option because, as a priority, because it's another way to address the opioid epidemic by looking at the economic tools we have to put pressure on China around the distribution of the chemicals that are coming in and killing so many people with fentanyl. And no, I don't have we literally have an enormous document of all the things I want to work on. And I plan on having a long career and checking those off as I go. But we have not decided officially on our first bill. I don't know if Yadira has some breaking news.
Thank you for the reminder, because I didn't answer that there at the end. Our first bill just dropped today. Actually, it was introduced today. It has to do, it's called the Trank Act, which has to do with xylazine, which is a new non-opioid tranquilizer that is being that has infiltrated the markets around the same way that fentanyl has. This is not an opioid, and so all of the education that we've done around the use of Narcan does not apply to this drug. It is not intended for human use. It's actually a veterinary tranquilizer that people like my cousin, who is a veterinarian, have used in the past to tranquilize cows and horses, and basically is being used in the drug markets now because it will knock people out, and sadly, because it is not responsive to naloxone or Narcan, then it can lead to overdose deaths that we can't reverse. There's already been at least 2 overdose deaths in Colorado that we know of. It's much more common on the coasts, but it's definitely gone west into Colorado. And so what we're going to be doing is giving the ability for NIST, the National Institute of Standards, to be able to research this drug and others to make sure that we are collecting the information that we need, that we're able to measure it, that we're able to detect it, so that hopefully we can get ahead of it as it infiltrates different markets and causes harm to people in Colorado and across the country.
This is actually, and you all probably have heard about this through, it's called the zombie drug. And I had the opportunity to meet with a veterinarian on this issue and what they're seeing that they've been using for decades. And now it's starting to show up in the drug supply chain. And so thank you for your leadership on this.
Thank you.
All right, I'll hand it over to Fish to ask the next question.
Yeah, because I'm from the farm in Iowa, though, but, Representative Caraveo, you were on the Ag Committee, and the Farm Bill is something that is renewed every 5 years or something. And I'm wondering if you could just talk a little bit about that, because it's like such a it's kind of a big deal, and not just for people from the farm.
It is a huge deal. It's like you said, reauthorized every 5 years, and basically anything that has to do with agriculture, with food, with any of those markets that you can imagine, the Farm Bill touches. A lot of the money that goes into that comes out of the Farm Bill, I should say, has to do with nutrition. That's in particular interest of mine as a pediatrician, because basically every single day for the last 15 years, I've been talking to children about nutrition and what a huge part of their health nutrition is. And sadly, sometimes what a huge stressor it is for families, with the fact that, we have all seen, especially with the rise of different prices with inflation, how expensive sometimes it can be just to put food on the table, whether it's eggs, whether it's any other thing that we take in every day. SNAP can be a lifesaver to families. It is the difference between feeding your family and not. A lot of the money that comes out of the Farm Bill goes directly into nutrition, and that can become a part of a point of contention with our opposing parties, because they are already sharpening their knives and trying to see where it is that they're going to cut nutrition benefits, because they can't cut Medicare and they can't cut Social Security. Those are unpopular things to cut. But on the other side, it becomes a very bipartisan bill as well, because anything that has to do with supporting farmers is part of the Farm Bill. So whether it's how we handle commodity markets, which I'm the ranking member on the subcommittee that deals with that and with rural development, whether it is crop insurance, a whole host of different things that farmers need to be able to survive, that comes directly in the form of the Farm Bill. And so it is one of the bills that absolutely will have to pass in this session. It is one that will have to pass with with Democrats and Republicans supporting it. And so it is a real opportunity for the two parties to come together to talk about what is important to them in terms of food. Food, whether you're in a rural area or an urban area, it is what brings us all together, whether you produce it or whether you mainly consume it and you've never seen a cow in your life. Food is what really brings us all together. And so it's really neat to be on the Agriculture Committee, to be able to talk across the aisle, to reach across the aisle, to make sure that we are taking care of both the people in my district who need help with nutrition, and that we're ensuring that the farmers who work so hard every day to put food on our tables are getting what they need to stay an important part of the economy.
I wonder, obviously the bill is super sprawling and it covers like everything, but is there like one specific thing that you're going to focus on and trying to add into the farm bill or defend? It sounds like obviously the nutrition elements are really important to you, but anything that you see as like a must pass or an element that you want to add in that's not already in there?
The nutrition aspects are going to be incredibly important, but we also touch on things like rural high-speed internet. And so especially for the rural areas of my district and the rest of Colorado, investment in that is going to be incredibly important, something that will be one of the things that I focus on in the Farm Bill, because, as a doctor, I've seen how important high-speed internet is, not to just watching Netflix or checking your email, right? It's about being able to reach your doctor. It's for people like my brother who lives in rural Montana. It's the difference between my niece being able to access additional education materials when she outgrows her school a little bit. It's a whole host of different issues that keep our economy going and keep our families going. And so rural broadband is going to be something that I'm really focused on.
And Congressman Pettersen, obviously one of your predecessor, Ed Perlmutter's big priorities that he didn't get quite finished before he left Congress was giving legal marijuana industry access to banking. And I kind of wonder if you feel like you're going to pick up the mantle on that. If you talk to Congressman Perlmutter about that priority, if you've started having any conversations in Congress, feels like we've been thinking about this for a long time, but within very small margin of getting it passed with some Republican opposition maybe in the Senate. But is that a priority for you? How do you work to get that passed after all these years?
Yeah, thanks, Jesse. That's definitely a priority for me because it's important for Colorado. This is an issue that I'm very disappointed hasn't been solved yet. And Ed fought for years on this. And I told him we're going to make it happen and he'll be at the bill signing. But it definitely should have happened before he left. I think that this is reflective of a showing that the federal government can actually respond to the needs of our states and communities. This is something that is common sense. And that's what I love about Ed Perlmutter, is that it's not like he ran on safe banking or that's why he got involved in politics and ran for office. But this was an issue that was facing our state and he led on it. So absolutely, safe banking is very important to ensure that the industry that we have all approved as voters to exist actually has a safe way to keep their money and that we're not putting people in danger.
All right, Fish has a fun question now.
Yeah, I love to go to DC, and I'm just wondering if you can talk a little bit about what it's like to be in that city. What's the coolest thing you've done outside of work? Have you met anybody in real life that you would never have imagined? And what's the number one thing you'd recommend a constituent visiting see in DC while they're there? Representative Pettersen?
Ooh, so many, so many parts to that question. I would say number one thing is going to the Library of Congress. It's one of the most beautiful buildings that I've ever seen. And it is open to the public for everybody to visit. And definitely, if you come to DC, please let me know. We'll make sure that that we show you around. I think that something that you must do is, like I said, let me know you're going to be here, and then we'll take you on the House floor. It is surreal to step on that floor for the first time, and you can only do that, I believe, with a member of Congress. And so I think that is a must do. People that I've met, well, I guess, we had the opportunity as freshmen to go to the White House, and we were able to meet President Biden and Vice President Kamala Harris. And there's a picture that we put on Twitter where Yadira and I were giving each other a hug, listening to the president speak at the White House. And she said, "Can you believe we're here?" We never thought as kids, we would never anticipate that we would be here. And so just those moments that are just amazing. But I don't know. I think that what do you have, Yadira?
Yeah, I think that it's just surreal to be in so many of these places. One thing that happened even, excuse me, before we were sworn in is we got a nighttime tour of the Capitol, right? And so it's when everybody's gone, the building is very quiet, and you get an usher all to yourself who tells you all about the history of the building and the parts that burned down and the parts that were under siege on January 6th, sadly, and you just realize the history that has happened in this building and what a part of it you are and what a small part of it you are at the same time, and that comes with really everybody that you meet. There's people who I saw on TV for years before this, or whose names are famous, right, and have resonated with me as a Democrat or as an American, and suddenly you're serving with those people, and you see them in the halls and say hello as you're walking by them, and I was able to take my brother to the White House, and we just kept looking at each other and going, whoever would have thought when my mom and dad decided to come and try their luck in the United States to provide a better life for their kids, that their kids would be in the White House one day, getting to hear the president speak. So the whole thing is surreal. The whole thing is an incredible privilege, and serving with the people who are still here and who have served here in the past is a real honor.
Can I add? The greatest non-work thing that I've done was I got to go to the Nuggets game last night in DC. Representative Trone invited me because it was our team that was here, and he has tickets that are basically, it's second row. So it was the closest I've ever been, and I got to sit up front to watch the Nuggets in DC, and I tried to cheer loudly because there were obviously a lot of the other team's fans.
I wonder, you guys obviously know that the state capitol, the state legislature has like the Gold Dome High School kind of moniker. And I remember, like, even as a first year journalist, you kind of get like nervous and you're left out of conversations and stuff like that. In Congress, I wonder if you guys are brought into like the policy debates, like the really important policy stuff that's happening, or if it's like you kind of have to work your way into that. Like, talk about, are you guys in the room for some of those really big discussions that are happening, or is it something that takes, your second, third term before you can really kind of, I don't know, be in some of those really high level meetings? What's like the highest level meeting you've been in? I'll go with Congresswoman Caraveo.
Yeah, I think it's a mix, right? With any job that you come to, in particular, right? The job that I held before going into politics, with medicine, it's very hierarchical, right? You have to train to get to those upper echelons and to be the expert in a field, and this is no different. So there's people everywhere to learn from who you may think, I've found the one idea to fix this problem, and then you're told, we tried that 10 years ago, and it didn't work. But then you can also suddenly have an interesting approach or spin to a problem, and be surprised that nobody's thought of it before. So it's a little bit of both, where you're definitely at the bottom of the heap sometimes, and learning from everybody around you, and yet you are still in the room for some of these discussions, and you still have one voice out of 435, one voice that represents, you're the only one from your district, and so it's you are part of the process.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. No doubt that it takes longer in Congress to build seniority. There aren't term limits, so people stay longer. Leadership definitely has a lot of control over what happens in Washington. I would say the opportunity that myself and Representative Caraveo have to really make a difference is in our committees. Although everything is completely based on seniority, I literally am the last person to be able to say something if there's a witness there, because I'm the last on the totem pole, which I'm not used to. And in the state legislature, I'm used to being able to raise my hand and not have every single thing be seniority. So that is very different. I'm reminded that I have a long way to go all the time, but you do have a big opportunity in your subcommittees because it's a smaller group to start getting to know your colleagues and making sure that that you're trying to build those relationships and work on issues together. And we also have a lot of opportunity with the caucuses that we're in. So we're both part of the New Dems, and there's a ton of working groups where you get to work with your other Democratic colleagues on issues. But the one that I'm very excited to be on is the Problem Solvers Caucus, which is an even amount of Democrats and Republicans who are trying to do the behind the scenes work to find compromise on the must pass issues, the must solve issues. And they were key in the infrastructure negotiations when all of the leadership negotiations kind of fell apart. They had solutions to bring to the table that they could pull from to actually get something done. And so I find that is a really influential caucus that I'm a part of, and the people that come to speak and the people that I get to work with.
Okay, so we're gonna head into some reader questions now, and if folks want to send in reader questions, again, just questions@coloradosun.com. They kind of pop up right before me when you send them in, so we'll try and add them in. So I think I'm gonna combine like a few here. I think this is a really interesting question. So, what has been your most successful strategies in conversations with Congress people that may disagree with you? I know obviously there are probably folks within the the Colorado congressional delegation you disagree with. And especially right now, given that you're in a split Congress and you need Republican support in the House to get anything done. So what strategies have you used to try and get your voice into those conversations? There are people obviously who are kind of very opposite ends of the spectrum to where you both are politically. Congresswoman Pettersen, why don't you go first on that?
Yeah. Well, I think that a member that has been here longer than me gave really good advice, which is if you're here because you want to be recognized for something, then I can't help you on how to be effective. But if you're here to actually, get things done for your community and for your state and your country, then there are a lot of ways that you can be effective in the minority. And a lot of that is actually you having ideas and pitching other people to lead on them and building those bridges so that you have other advocates who are actually bringing those issues and getting them done. And so I'm somebody that, and so is Representative Yadira Caraveo, is we don't care about getting the headline. We don't care about being recognized for that. We are here to roll up our sleeves and to fight for our community. And so I think that that's really good advice on what you can do behind the scenes. And I did this even in the legislature because there are issues that people expected me to, yell about and fight for, where, I needed other people to be those allies and to bring those budget amendments, to bring those bills, because I was losing political capital with how much I was asking for. And so I think that I've leveraged that in the past, even in the majority, but what we can do to build those allies. And I'm hosting a bipartisan happy hour. I have one next week where we're bringing together, Yadira is part of it too, bringing together a bipartisan group of freshmen to start building those relationships across the aisle. In the past, we had, I think the previous term, there were 9 new people that came in. And this last term, I don't even know what the number went up to. It was over 70. It was 75, I think, when we all took our picture. And then there were additional ones that came later. So there was a huge freshman class that came in. And from 2018, someone pointed out that there are 50% of the people who were there in 2018 are now gone. And so you have a big turnover in Congress and an opportunity to change culture and to actually try to build those relationships now. So I think that that's a strategy that we both utilized.
Absolutely. Agree with Brittany. There's always the show horses and the work horses, and we both have definitely approached our time in the Colorado legislature and now Congress as a workhorse. And I think a lot of that has to do with our backgrounds and the fact that we didn't, when we were 3, think that that we were going to be in Congress. I think that the way that I approach what can be disagreements or what can be differences of opinion in how different people approach problems is my background. I am actually the first, not just the first Latina doctor from Colorado in Congress, I'm the first Latina doctor in Congress. It has been pointed out to me since I came here. Dr. Ruiz has pointed that out to me. So I have a very different lens in the way that I approach things, the way that I see things in life, in legislation, and the way that I see things for my district, simply because of what my lived experience is. I can approach problems in a way that perhaps other people have not thought of in the past, because I can think of it both as the daughter of immigrants, as a Latina, as a minority woman in the United States, and as somebody with a STEM background, a science background, and who has taken care of patients for 10 years in the district that I am. So that is a background that elicits some automatic respect, in particular around my expertise in medicine, and really allows me to argue for things in ways that people don't expect and that appreciate.
So, last month I scraped the lobbying data and looked at what Colorado companies and local governments and organizations spent. And they spent $56 million lobbying the federal government last year. And one of our readers has asked what pressures you feel to meet with lobbyists and interact with them as they try to get you to support their interests. Representative Caraveo.
It's not dissimilar from the pressures that we face in the state house and the state senate, where an inordinate amount of money is also spent on lobbying members. Honestly, here it might, I feel it a little bit less, because it is, my time is so incredibly precious that I've really prioritized meeting with groups like today. The council members from Commerce City were here. I spend it talking to members of the Teamsters, groups that don't necessarily have a lobbyist and that really need that direct access to a member of Congress that everybody thinks that a lobbyist automatically gets. We certainly are surrounded by members of the lobby at different receptions and events, and so they certainly get to speak to us and get access to us as well. But what I have always tried to do as a legislator is to be the lobbyist for the people who don't have one, to make sure that I am thinking of their needs at the forefront of everything that I do in the legislative process. And it is, once you decide to do that, it's a path that you certainly can take while still acknowledging that they are part of the process and somebody whose voice you take into consideration as well.
I think that she hit all the points, but this is when I think about being in the state legislature, after COVID happened and nobody could be in the building except for us, basically no lobbyists were there. I remember the relief I had, not because, it's not because they have so much influence. It's just that you were pulled in 20 different directions all the time, and people constantly wanting to meet with you. People that are trying to pull you out to get you to do whatever amendment. And it was, I just remember the relief that I felt when the lobbyists had to be away, when we could actually just be a legislature and not deal with that. Of course, they were texting and doing everything else. But when I think about it just, I know that there's a lot of money, and I know that they do have influence in Washington, and probably more so that plays out with leadership. But you interact in a much different way here in Congress. And Yadira's right. We meet with groups, people who are coming from our district to talk about the issues that they're facing in the community. And it's not lobbyists lined up. So
The-
I also, of course, there's plenty of lobbyists who provide important information on things that are helpful for us to know. And even if you don't agree, it is a perspective that, we always have our door open to listen, but prioritizing the groups and the people who are coming to Washington. And then we're right back at home where we're in our district meeting with constituents and doing our district outreach. And so I think that surprisingly, it's a lot more limited with the opportunities that lobbyists have here in DC with members of Congress.
I think for anyone listening who hasn't been to the Colorado Capitol, lawmakers really, when they leave the House or Senate floor, it's like they are immediately surrounded. So
Yeah, it's very interesting too. I mean, I guess when citizen legislature versus Congress too, there's kind of like a caricature of what a lobbyist is, but then of course there's folks who lobby for nonprofits and for interest groups that aren't necessarily major corporations, and it's always kind of interesting to hear what people think those are. And I remember those days at the Capitol when it was just journalists and lawmakers. It was really interesting. Like the people who were the most influential were the ones who had the best Rolodex, which was kind of a fascinating shift of like, instead of people stopping in the hallways, it was very different. It was an insidery important change.
Yeah, only you get what I'm talking about, but I appreciate it.
Yeah, but it is interesting to hear kind of like what the shift is, just as kind of a politics geek, right? I mean, obviously the U.S. Capitol is like a less accessible place than the state capitol, where anybody can go in. And I've of course just seen random constituents walk into lawmakers' offices, and I don't think it's quite that easy in Washington.
Yes, there's a lot of barriers, I think, that that I appreciate in that way.
Yeah. So a few of our readers had kind of economic questions, and I was wondering, in light of what's been going on with kind of the emerging banking crisis, if either of you feel like there needs to be some kind of congressional role or congressional steps taken to kind of rein in what's going on, just with some of the scary stuff with withdrawals and people's money maybe not being there when they're trying to pull it out, or companies thinking of Silicon Valley Bank, Signature Bank, First Republic, just a few different ones. I don't know if there's conversations that are happening in Congress, but those, I know these aren't super central to the committees that you guys are on, but I wonder what you're hearing from on that standpoint. We can start with you, Congresswoman Pettersen.
Yeah, thanks. Well, this is something I talked about getting on the Financial Services Committee because I want to make sure that I'm the strongest advocate I can be around housing. And my background, I've done a lot of work on education and in public health issues, economic opportunity and equity. And so now on the Financial Services Committee, absolutely, we play a major role in making sure that we're adjusting to what's happening. And we had a very busy weekend when this first started happening with the news that came out with the bank going under and what that meant for depositors. I think that the delay over the weekend created a lot of anxiety around people who have, the good thing about being in public service, I don't have to worry about the money in my bank because we don't have but we had a lot of calls from just people who were kind of sounding the alarm that if we didn't give depositors the reassurance that they were going to be covered, that people were going to start at bank runs. And we know that this is how depressions and recessions are caused. So it was a big concern that weekend. Ultimately, I think that we had the federal message and leadership that we needed to reduce the anxiety that people had, to make sure that depositors knew that they would be protected. But I think that, in the next year, it is addressing inflation around reducing costs for families and what we need to do with, I think, the Inflation Reduction Act and what they're doing to invest in long-term energy needs to reduce costs for families is a very important piece of this. It's also addressing the workforce shortage the workforce shortages that we're seeing across the board. And this causes inflation. We know that businesses in Colorado, no matter who you talk to, they are unable to fill their needs. They're unable to grow. And in fact, businesses across the 7th District in Colorado, some are at the brink of having to declare bankruptcy, because even though there is need for their services and their goods, they can't fill these roles. And so we can't talk about inflation without talking about the need for immigration reform, and the fact that we have cut off the opportunity for people to work here who have those skills, who are coming to the United States for and paying for expensive schools where they want to stay and work here. And we don't even make that possible. And they go and work in other countries where they're competing. It doesn't make sense. And so in our long-term challenges that we're facing in our economy, we have to talk about the need for immigration reform and addressing the workforce shortages that we're seeing here because of failed policies.
Yeah, Congresswoman Caraveo, obviously economy is such a broad thing, right? Like the inflation stuff is related to the bank failure issues, with rising, tightening federal monetary policy. Immigration, I think, is an interesting segue into that. I don't know if you want to, it's a big apple to take a bite out of, but wherever you want to go with that question.
I think going back to the banking issue, that's the incredible part of being part of this body, is that when things like this happen, we are part of the Congress that has oversight abilities. And so the ability to delve into exactly what it was that happened in the system, what went wrong, what went right, in the age of a social media induced bank run, as so many are calling it, that we are able to be part of a body that will go back and look as to whether the regulations worked, whether they were followed, and to make sure that the banking system is working for everybody, including the working families who were put in danger sometimes when different regulations are or aren't followed. That is what is incredible about being another incredible part of being part of this body.
Can I also, we have to talk about, we're at the brink of whether or not we're going to be able to address the debt ceiling again. And we have people who are holding our economy hostage, playing politics, that this would absolutely decimate our states and have global impacts. So we are the United States and we need to pay our bills. This is absolutely irresponsible and it would throw us off a cliff. And so that is looming right around the corner. And, beyond some of the fragile signs that we're seeing right now, if we fail to find compromise on this, if we fail to address the debt ceiling, this is going to be devastating for Colorado's economy in the long term.
Fish, go ahead.
One of the things that I think a lot of people don't realize is that actually one of the big roles for you is serving your constituents in ways that maybe people don't think much about. And one of the readers did ask, how are you staying in touch with your constituents when you're in DC so much, and how can people reach out to you? Representative Caraveo.
So we, I think sometimes people forget that we're back home basically every single weekend, and so we come here to work 4 or 5 days a week, and then we go back and we work in the district. And so the tie there is very strong and deep. And then on top of that, we're hearing from our staff every single day the work that they're doing directly for constituents. I will tell you that over the last 2 weeks with spring break, I have been hearing about a lot of passport requests. So everybody check the expiration date on your passport, because post-COVID, you may have forgotten that you didn't renew it. And the passport offices are quite busy, although if you contact your congressperson, we can expedite it for you. It's things like that that keep us in touch with our constituents every single day. I'm joking that anybody who we help with a passport, I will absolutely accept a postcard so that I can live vicariously through you about the amazing travels that you're taking, but also making sure that you're receiving your Social Security checks, that the different agencies like the IRS are responding to your needs and requests, especially especially in a time when they are understaffed and therefore can't always answer phone calls as quickly as we would like them to. And so there are stories that we're hearing every single day from our staff and from our constituents, on top of always being back home, that make Colorado part of the central part of every single thing that we do here in DC.
This is a great question because it's the best part of this job is it's the direct constituent services that we're able to provide. So we both have a district team and then we have our DC team, and they're working together every single day for the constituents in our communities, and then also making sure that we're taking those challenges and ideas to bring policy recommendations. I can't tell you from just being elected for a few months how many ideas that I have just from meeting with people from across the district. And Yadira and I, we come to DC for the voting days, and for all of you who don't follow all of this, which I understand if you don't, it's usually Monday nights, which is odd for us coming from the legislature where we have floor work that usually starts in the day. But Monday morning, I get to see my 3-year-old son and get him ready for school and tell him you won't see me just for 2 days, because then on Thursday night, we come home and I get to see him before he goes to bed. And so that's how I try to make myself feel better that it's only 2 days. But we are immediately back in the district. And even when we're here, the people that we're meeting with in our offices, it's back-to-back people from our district who are visiting to talk about issues. And so we're constantly in touch with the needs of our constituents. And then in terms of reaching out, I think Yadira might have touched on this, but send an email to our office on our official website, and you will get a response back. We actually have teams of people that are paid to answer the phones, to respond by email. And we also do active outreach as well as Yadira with text messages, asking questions, and emails, and then teletown halls and town halls in different communities.
Okay, so we've got a few more minutes here, and I want to keep to our schedule since I know you two are very busy. And obviously, there's so many topics that we could talk about, from climate change to gun regulations to immigration to healthcare. But the reality is, Democrats are in the minority in the House, and so that means what you can get passed is very limited, with the split Congress. So I wonder, this is kind of a combination of reader questions and my own question, but how do you get anything done? Realistically, how do you view it and kind of go to work today, still go to work every day, kind of thinking that you might be able to pass certain policies with the very obvious reality that, any bill that you introduce is extremely unlikely to pass unless you somehow can get a Republican sponsor and convince all these people in leadership to pay attention to the new lawmaker. In the minutes that we have left, I guess we'll start with Congressman Caraveo. How do you? That's a very tall task. How do you approach it?
I approach it the way that I learned to approach it in the state legislature, right? Where we worked across party lines. 2/3 of my bills had a Republican votes on them, if not a Republican co-sponsor. And that's exactly the way that I'm approaching it here, whether it's the farm bill, whether it's the xylazine bill that I talked about earlier, or the bills that we have kind of coming down the pike, really trying to find that point of consensus, of agreement with somebody across the aisle, especially now that they're in the majority, but whether in the state house it was when they were in the minority, making sure that we're approaching things in the way that my district would like, I think in particular in the way that Coloradans appreciate, and getting both viewpoints into a point of agreement optimally.
Yeah, that's a good question, Jesse. And, I'm not expecting to pass some of the reproductive health protections that we care deeply about, and gun safety measures and things like that this year. But there are actually so many opportunities to make an impact. So today, I'm sure that Yadira also had to do the final pass through all of the community projects funding requests that are coming through. So we have the opportunity to submit 15 projects throughout the district that we would like funded, with some parameters and restrictions on that. But I don't have the total amount, but it is tens of millions of dollars for dedicated uh, money for improving these local communities for ideas that they have. And that's very exciting. It's also leveraging your position for, we were able to sign on to a letter to make sure that the Tabor refunds weren't taxed. And that was because we all added our names. And so we used to say in the state legislature that sending a letter to Congress was a letter to Santa Claus. And so in the state legislature, letters don't necessarily mean anything, or I mean, you wish that they did, but they didn't really. Here, it actually, you get to bring attention to the issues, to put pressure on agencies for things like Tabor refunds. We drew attention to what was happening with the Postal Service and the fact that people in Chaffee County and Lake were not getting their mail. And they sent temporary workers to catch up on their backlog, and they started holding a hiring, trying to hire people locally with a jobs fest. So it was, things like that outside of policy, where you actually get to utilize this position and leverage that for to make an impact in your community. I also think that, back to what I was saying before, is it's not about getting credit. And so you can come up with good ideas and try to get Republicans to lead on it or add it to their bills in order to get it passed. And so that is a strategy. Like I said, I have a very long list, and coming from the legislature, both of us do, of things that we plan on getting done. We don't need it to be our names. We need it to be solved for our community. And so working with those Republican colleagues to actually incorporate it.
Any earmarks, breaking news you guys want to share before we go? Your spokespeople.
Yeah, I guess earmarks got a bad name, but a bad reputation, I should say. I understand why there are the restrictions that we have now because of that. But it's a huge opportunity we have for improvements in the community. When I talk about Custer County, that bright red county that not many people voted for me there, but we have a funding request that would make a huge impact in their ability to draw tourists and support businesses and actually bring in the revenue that they need. And so there's a lot of things. I'm telling you, outside of DC, it feels like it's just this terrible place, and you're stuck not doing anything. But I feel like we are making a difference every single day. But I know we are. I know we're making a difference every day.
Congresswoman
Feel
Caraveo,
free to send us your list of priorities.
Yeah. Do you want to share one, Congresswoman Caraveo, since Representative Pettersen shared one?
It's all infrastructure for us. So whether it's roadways, whether it's water lines, whether it's things around PFAS, it's really incredible projects that we've gotten submissions from. Now, keep in mind, they still have to be approved, but we have made our list of what we are submitting, and it's going to come in different rounds because you submit to different subcommittees on the Appropriations Committee. But hopefully the majority party agrees with the projects that Colorado needs and makes investments in our state.
Awesome. Well, thank you guys so much. I'm sorry I went over a few minutes. I really, really appreciate your time tonight. Thank you again to the Colorado Sun team behind the scenes who made this possible, Christina Pritchett and Eric Lubers. Thanks to Sandra Fish. Thank you to your staffs who helped us make this possible. And thank you again to all of our Colorado Sun members who join and support our work and make things like this possible. Hope you sign up to become an unaffiliated member. Tomorrow morning, we'll have a recap of this event. And look forward to talking to you two both soon. Good luck and safe travels back to Colorado if you're coming back tonight.